Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new episode of Skylanders Imaginators Versus here on the channel. As always, the timer is being kicked off the moment these respective Skylanders have been placed on the portal. It would appear as though Tycoon Crow did have a slightly shorter catchphrase right there, but it doesn't matter because he managed to clip the bridge and lose a couple of frames there, but it doesn't really matter when they have an 8-minute lead brought about by the advantage that Wolfgang single-handedly brought the villains to. As you can see, both teams have the exact same number within their respective casts, but the villains are ahead on both Imaginite chests and on the timer. This is because in the previous episode, Wolfgang was absolutely annihilative incarnate because he managed to get through a grand majority of Dragon Temple single-handedly, mind you. So he single-handedly managed to bring the villain cast back to the same status as the Senseis, as the Senseis lost two of their respective members. Unfortunate for Buckshot and Airstrike, even though Airstrike, just like Wolfgang, really did try his hardest, but in the end it would appear that not even Airstrike's hardest was enough to clutch out that Bowslinger Doomlander fight. Regardless, this episode is dedicated to, unfortunately, the cake collecting segment, aka the filler segment of Imaginators. They just couldn't let you go straight into abandoned amusement park. They had to make you wait to play the best damn level in the game. Frankly, I couldn't blame them, but unfortunately this means that I had to collect these cake parts twice in a row. Now, both of these teams are going to tackle a different area because I want to find out definitively which actual task is longer, though my hypothesis is that the arena is going to be longer because I completely forgot this when recording for the villains, which was recorded first this time around because it was their turn to go first, and Sal has his entire monologue followed by his singing number, so that alone will make the arena much longer than the dungeon where we get to remain as Flarewolf here because the magic element has popped up where unfortunately Buckshot, as we previously mentioned, was defeated in the previous episode, so we can't exactly switch out for him on behalf of the Sensei. But luckily, Flarewolf is better than Buckshot in basically every conceivable way, so this is definitely a blessing for Senseis here. Even in tight quarters, the enemies are no chance for Flarewolf's explosive capabilities, and they really match his personality very well. They really hone into his wild side, though that ambush was not much appreciated by the enemy right now. And Sal is just about finally done with his musical number. I'm not sure how developers could possibly call that music, because, you know, what I heard right now was many things, but music was not one of them. Enough of dissing on Sal, though. He's a great NPC. Tycoon Crow now has this opportunity to fight in the arena, and we started off with both the fire Skylanders here because I felt like it would only be appropriate kicking this off with fire characters because this is Ignite the Fire we're talking about here. The channel gets its name from my love of this element. So it's only right to honour the channel as well as honour my favourite element of Skylanders as well as my favourite element of Senseis in this game because the Fire Elemental cast is actual perfection. But we're not going to be remaining as the fire representative for the Senseis for much longer because now the light element has popped up. So it's time for Legendary Tri-Tip to come in and be absolutely obliterative. If only he had to fight the Battle Gong rather than Buckshot on the previous episode, I'm sure the Senseis would be much better off right now because Tycoon Crow is already, well, Tycoon Crow and Tri-Tip both have already proven themselves as absolute badasses, though that might change for Tycoon Crow because he has already taken a ton of damage on this first stage, so now he's going to have to play things particularly safe. And the problem is that I say he took a ton of damage. He took practically no damage whatsoever, but Tycoon Crow's health bar is so low that 2 hits and he's basically dead. It's Kaboom 2.0 when it comes to the lack of health that Tycoon Crow possesses. At level 20, he has less health than most characters at level 1. It is quite the disgrace, but speaking of the actual opposite of that, Tri-Tip, to no one's surprise, has absolutely obliterated everything on sight. He has managed to rescue Blobbers, and now they get to move on with one cake piece to call their own. Once Blobbers is done with his monologue, mind you, that's the most painful part of having to go through this cake segment twice, watching all of these unskippable cutscenes over and over again. I truly suffered to bring you this episode. Don't say I never do anything for you guys, because this just proves the goodness that I do this purely out of the goodness of my heart. So that being said, or stuttering aside, Tycoon Crow definitely has a reliance on buzzer beats right now, but could you blame him? Buzzer beats are pretty pretty awesome. Especially when, you know, if they are humongous and take up half of the screen size. You just gotta be careful that the big mama doesn't block any enemies' visibility, so you can make sure to dodge their attacks just fine. Well, speaking of dodging, the enemies really need to get better at dodging Tri-Tip's attacks because they are failing miserably and taking so much damage in the process. Like, seriously, this is what obliteration looks like. And Tri-Tip doesn't even have his Soul Gem ability yet. That is one thing I have realised playing Tri-Tip constantly, that the Meteor was never summoned in. So, even without the Soul Gem ability, this just goes to show how overpowered Tri-Tip gets as he battles up. That's a home run right there. And yes, the peak in the audio was totally worth it. So here we go with Tri-Tip having collected the second cake piece, while Sal continues to monologue on behalf of the villains. So I think we can now definitively say that the dungeon is certainly quicker, and it's not even that my routing was that efficient. Flarewolf there made several mistakes in terms of how efficient his route was, but bearing in mind that because the senseis were going through the dungeon for the first time, they didn't have prior knowledge because they took up a different path compared to villains which did go through the first unexperienced run, for less prepared run, so to say. So naturally that meant that for the senseis, I had practically no clue, because the dungeon segment is so forgettable that no matter how many times I play it, it just seems to kind of banish from my mind instantly when I go back to replay it. That's basically the cake section in its entirety when you have to collect all these cake parts. But what I do love about this Vulture Ambush as Tycoon Crow just runs around the stage is that you get the increased speed much like you do in the MAP, so having that just makes the segment very particularly fast-paced. But now the Sensei is going to be collecting some Imaginite chests, something that they desperately need because they're behind on Imaginite chests, like they're behind on literally every other category besides the cast. But the cast doesn't give them any advantages, given that when compared to villains, they are dead even. And dead even is not winning. That is not what winning looks like. But now with Legendary Tri-Tip having gathered all of the cake parts from the little sky section there, that was very important as to why we discovered the Dark Realm in one of the previous episodes. Having discovered the Dark Realm meant that that section went by a lot more quickly for either of these teams, so it's a damn good thing they were sure to do such a task. And now Tycoon Crow is launching off again! I couldn't help myself, the reference was just kind of lying in wait for me right there. But now, let's see as Tycoon Crow blows shit up, because I love watching Tycoon Crow blow shit up. Then again, I love watching Tycoon Crow do just about anything because he has so much charisma. And now the senseis have discovered a life round. That's a small tad bit of a waste, but it does mean that they have plenty more cake pieces to be collecting whilst traversing that particular area, because there's two. There's the first cake piece from underneath for the life round, and then once we blow up this wall with Tri-Tip over here, we can pop on inside and grab ourselves the fourth cake piece. So already, well, it's the fifth cake piece, so the senseis are more than halfway through, whereas Tycoon Crow still needs to speak with Pop Fizz for the second time, right after he chases that rat, because by going into the cave here, he can collect himself a fourth cake part. So now let's speak with Pop Fizz, and then Tri-Tip's got to be very cautious not to accidentally trigger that ambush, because whilst it would give him an Imaginite chest to add to their respective collection, it would, however, waste time, meaning that Tri-Tip would obviously have to defeat all those enemies along the way. But speaking of things to defeat, Tri-Tip's going to have plenty of combat to have to worry about in the upcoming dungeon level, where we got to defuse some bombs, though we got to wait in order to press the best button in video game, the skip button, get Mag's Deep Stew out of here. Mag's is really well known for her Deep Stew as well, so that's why it's so glorious to press the best button in video game whenever she's around. Well, it appears though Tycoon Crow is accidentally discovering the magic realm, so between firing off to the wrong platform there, as well as discovering the magic realm, and now he'll be discovering the life realm as well. So Tycoon Crow is losing a lot of time based on this inefficient routing, and I was criticising the Flarewolf earlier for this exact same problem. This 8-minute lead the villains have. Are they about to lose it all in over the course of one entire episode? Is this going to be the epic Sensei comeback, a bit like in the previous episode where Wolfgang single-handedly brought it back for villains and gave them an advantage in pretty much every single category, increasing their lead over Senseis for the timer, and also evening out the cast? That was a bit of an odd freeze frame on behalf of Legendary Tri-Tip's perspective, when I was initially playing through the game right there, I thought I managed to crash the video game. I was worried that Tri-Tip was just too overpowered and the game couldn't handle it, but fortunately the game kind of corrected itself. So after that huge frame drop, we got straight back into the action. And speaking of getting straight back into the action, Tycoon Crow is going to be tackling, I can't remember what this is called, Battlefield or something like that. Calamity City. I wasn't even close. I was thinking of a level from Spyro's Adventure, but I believe it does have the Battlefield music. Or I could be completely wrong on that altogether as well. Both gameplay audios have been muted because having both of these gameplay audios on top of one another would be so incredibly annoying and difficult to follow. Air has popped up for the villains, which means we get to remain as Tycoon Crow even longer. Apparently we haven't played as Tycoon Crow enough as of just yet, because the air representative for the villains was defeated in combat and therefore cannot be used again throughout the remainder of this series. That's very unfortunate for Bad Juju. In fact, the villains and the senseis have both had the exact same losses for the air and the magic elements respectively. It would just appear that there's a combination of the magic characters being useless and the air characters apparently just having harder parts of the game to have to deal with. But it's mostly for due to the magic characters being useless, except for Painata. He just had a tough go with the Smash Doomlander fight, because Painata's hitbox combined with 2D Fire Spellpunks is not a mix for success, I will tell you that much. But now Legendary Tri-Tip has yet another little puzzle sequence to have to deal with, but luckily this means he has the opportunity to reunite gems as well as disconnect from Imaginators Service, apparently. Who even knew that the Imaginators Service was still live to be disconnected from in the first place. But now this puzzle's going to take a while, but it'll all be worth it in the end should all of these gems get reunited, because the senseis are going to get an Imaginite chest whilst the villains do not. So that's going to help them take back that advantage in terms of collecting Imaginite chests. And now it's time for the villains to finally make a switch over to Dr. Crankcase as the tech element pops up against the Mayor King Super King, aka the greatest name of the villain in Skylanders history. Dr. Crankcase has to be very particularly careful of this tank though, because those cannonballs have the jankiest hitbox in Imaginators history, and that is really saying a lot given how notoriously janky these hitboxes can get. But now we have the massive goo cannon! Yep, without a doubt, Crankcase is absolutely obliterating this section. It's Wolfgang all over again. I feel sorry for these enemies having to face just such annihilation right now. But luckily Tri-Tip has not only managed to connect back to the Imaginator service, but find a cake part along the way. Legendary Tri-Tip is just really making this game act in mysterious ways, because he's just so overpowered that the game can't possibly comprehend what it's meant to do in the face of such raw awesomeness. I gotta say, things are looking good for Legendary Tri-Tip's potential MVP award, but since that's voted on by you, the viewers, in a couple of episodes from now, I can't wait to see who you all shall pick for that titular award. It's going to be an exciting one. With that being said, the senseis only have one more cake piece to collect, so they can go down into this tunnel, much like the villains did, only to find nothing but a treasure chest. Well, it's not even a treasure chest, it's an Imaginite chest. So at the bare minimum, they do get to add more Imaginite chests to their collection. But that's not much of an advantage when they're losing time, because now they have to go through another cake level altogether, whereas the villains only have one fell cake part to collect, which is right by Scholarville, one of the ones that the senseis collected what feels like eons ago. Yes, I had to say that because of the haha funny Skylanders reference. I couldn't help myself, and the villains accidentally activated a surprise attack along the way, so it looks like Crankcase has more combat to deal with. They're going to be wasting time here, but given how much time they have over the senseis right now, I think losing a little time is more beneficial for them, because now if they get to earn an additional treasure chest or Imaginite chest on top of it. I don't know where I keep getting treasure chests from this episode. I keep saying the wrong form of chest right here. Kind of makes me wish that they called it like an Imaginite vault or just something different to set it apart from treasure chests, at least in terms of its name's sake. Now, Dr. Crankcase, unfortunately, given that he's level 20, these surprise attacks have difficulty based on what level your Skylander is at, so being that Dr. Crankcase is maxed out on his level 20, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to take him longer, but he's going to get through it unscathed. At least he wasn't defeated him being defeated was basically the worst case scenario. Tri-Tip has the key already. He has absolutely obliterated enemies to no one's surprise, so let's pop on through, and now he has a horn thingamabob to be dealing with as the villains finish up. They earn that Imaginite chest, as well as the final cake piece. Now they've got to make their way to Pop Fizz and mysteriously teleport a long way. That wasn't janky whatsoever. But the timer here is going to end as soon as this cutscene is said and done with. So that's fortunate for villains, given that now they are going to be at an even greater timed advantage, because as you can see, they are much farther ahead than the Senseis. But this is definitely going to be a shorter episode. Once you've played through the cake segments enough times, you learn how to do it quickly. It doesn't make it any less tedious, but at least if it's going to be tedious, it can be over and done with quickly. It's like Cars 2. It might be a bad film, but it's a fast-paced film, so at least the film is over quickly. That being said, we now have the tank once again to have to deal with, and it seems as though the tech element activated much sooner for the Sensei for some reason. But that's okay, because I have no doubt in my mind that chain reaction here can deal with this section just fine. I wanted to say Dr. Crankcase for a moment now. I'm getting names mixed up today. Much like I am Imaginite chests and treasure chests, I'm getting names of these respective teammates mixed up too. But chain reaction is going to very, very wisely duck and cover behind the cannonball, as well as take that food to ensure that his chances of being defeated remain within the single digits. You know, we definitely want more than a 10% chance of death here. That would be far from ideal, but luckily chain reaction's chances of survival have to be at 95% here. Like, look at this absolute obliteration. He is stacking damage, quite literally, because that's the whole idea behind chain reaction's moveset. He deals small damage, but he deals it in quick increments, so he stacks damage rather than dealing it all at once. Unless, of course, you do the jump attack like he just did. But against a grenade, which is killed in a single hit, I think a jumping attack was very much overkill. But luckily, from here on out, as this will be the last cake piece for the Senseis, it will mean that they will be finally able to stop that timer. And my gosh, they'd only be 10 minutes behind. Only. At this point, 10 minutes for the Senseis, given how slower they have been compared to the villains. I think only 10 minutes behind is a tad bit of a miracle. But here we go, back to the MAP. I wonder if they'll get the teleport, same as what the villains did. Like, here's the thing. The game wants to slow itself down. It wants to pad out its runtime by giving us this cake section, by giving us more content through it. And yet, when it's done, it teleports us back, which could have been used as additional time for playing the game, unless you're the Sensei. So Senseis have just had really bad luck here, because for some reason they didn't get the cake part from the rat hole, and then they didn't get the teleportation thing with Bob. I feel as though the cake parts you collect from going into the rat holes is probably at random. Either that, or when the rat dug it the first time when Flarewolf was speaking with Pop Fizz, it spawned in the cake part, but because he didn't actually go down the hole and physically collect it, it was lost. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but either way, it gave the Senseis a very unfair disadvantage. But you know what? Half of this series has been down to luck in the first place, let's be honest here, especially when it comes to armor, because armor has been an absolute savior for half these characters. But speaking of a savior, I am now finally done with the cake section after having played it twice in a row. I cannot, in good conscience, end off this video without first thanking all of my incredible channel members whose continued support help make these videos possible. Without them, these videos would be near impossible to make, so from the bottom of my heart, I truly appreciate every last one of them. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, there are plenty of options on screen now to explore, and please consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. On that note, this video is coming to an end, so thank you so much as always for watching. Until the next video arises, peace!